Two ways that you can start something. One is ambition, or you start with curiosity. Our chances of getting in is very, very high. And then in the day of interview, we fucked up. We fucked up real bad.
Today we're joined by Frank Chen. Frank Chen is the head of operations and finance for a startup, Captain.ai, which is a restaurant software business, and he is also the host of the Ideas Can Wait podcast, a founder-focused podcast for people in their 20s on startup, entrepreneurship, and personal development. And previously, Frank co-founded Summer, a 15-minute grocery startup.
I think looking back, it was the wrong way to start, to be very honest. I feel like one of the things that I really want to advocate is for people to try entrepreneurship, especially when they're young, especially even in their even in the universities, because I had a lot of the limiting beliefs. I thought that I wouldn't be able to do it, I would fail. But I think hearing about the story from other entrepreneurs can really inspire other people.
And in this podcast episode, me and Frank spoke about his perspectives on founding Summer, his interview with Y-Combinator, and how these experiences led to him starting Ideas Can Wait and Acesocial. Both are organizations focusing on building community for startup founders. And welcome to my conversation with Frank. How's the half marathon last week?
Oh, that was a challenge, and I was really surprised that I was able to finish, first of all, and second, run a lot faster than I typically used to run. So I really like running is really not my my goal or something that I want to pursue long term, but I think marathon is something that I see as a challenge. I think, my mom especially is a huge inspiration for me because she started running about 10 years ago, and then gradually she worked her way up. She started with, 10 kilometers, and she did half marathon, and now she's done like more than 40, 50 marathons, and she even run 100 kilometers. So, just looking at my mom and her journey, it really inspired me, and like I used to do a lot of bodybuilding. I'm still do now, and running is never the thing that I like because it's boring and it's hard. But because I see my mom, like she was able to do such a long distance running, and I think it requires a certain amount of tenacity, mindset, and just to pull through the long journey, 2 to 4 hours. It's crazy, right? So it's like she can do it. Why can't I do it? Like, so I started practicing about 2 months ago, just running 10 kilometers and 5 kilometers to start, and then I started like intermittent fasting about 2 months ago because I was really heavy. I need to lose some weight so that I can run a little faster. But yeah, I think I was surprised that I was able to run and finish it, and it was almost a minute faster per kilometer than what I have practiced. And I think the atmosphere really, gave me a huge boost, especially running with other people who's also trying to finish the challenge. What you didn't realize is that how much of a boost that can give you is just being in that setting and running with others and listening to people around you who's cheering is quite crazy. So I think I'm not gonna stop at half marathon. I'll try to do a full marathon soon in a year or so, but we'll see. I think this runs in the family, and I gotta finish the challenge.
What would you say is like the hardest part?
The hardest part is actually just getting over the mental hurdle that I'm able to do it. Like, to be honest, like before I used to think 10 kilometer was very hard. It's that mental hurdle, but the first time after I run the 10K, I was like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. I could do it. It's that recognizing that you have the ability to do it, right? So and when I train sometime 10K, 15K, and it gave me the confidence. Oh, okay, 20K may be fine. And in reality, when I did run it, 20K is fine. Like, even though I was really tired around kilometer 15, but the last five was tough, was okay, it's bearable. People usually have this perception, oh, it's crazy running 20 kilometers, running 40 kilometers. But what they didn't realize is that it's actually harder in your mind than it actually is in real life. So I think that hurdle was really tough for me, and realizing that I'm capable, or this is not a impossible task for me to finish. And it's funny that startup, it's a similar thing. Like people are startup founder are doing things that's impossible, that other people think it's crazy, but when you're actually there, and you actually see the details and how to get done, even though it might be a long journey, it might be a tough one, but it's possible. Like everyone should be encouraged, or should be confident that they can do it. It's always the self-limiting belief that stopped us from pursuing our goal and pursuing this challenge. And to be honest, I had the limiting belief when I was running, preparing to run. But yeah, like after getting that hurdle and realizing, oh, I could do it, the process is just hard work. And I didn't think it's that much of a challenge after
Mm,
getting the mental hurdle. Yeah.
absolutely. I think the most important part is like giving yourself the permission to really try and do the things that seems hard, but then a lot of times people just keep themselves out of it because they just think it's hard and they think they can do it. So yeah, I love that. And you mentioned earlier about startups. That's what I wanted to get into. Like you start out university studying accounting at U of T, and in your third year, you co-found a summer, a 15-minute grocery delivery startup, which had made over 200K in revenue in its lifetime. Can you tell me a little bit more about like the story behind it? Like, how did everything kind of come together?
Like I reflected quite a bit why I decided to go entrepreneurship. I started to write about my personal blog. I haven't really published it, but I think I reflected. I think one very important thing is that I think since I was growing up, just a bit of context, I grew up in China, and then I came to Canada when I was 14 years old. And where I was growing up is Beijing, which is the capital of the city. But that's not where I was born. I was actually born in the southern part. It's called Zhejiang. And then my parents brought me to Beijing to study. And to surprise you, even though it's all Chinese people in there, in China, but there's actually a slight regional discrimination, right? And they label you as, non-Beijing people when you're actually going to elementary school. So growing up, I was always labeled the outside kid. And I was like, you're from another region, but not growing up for Beijing. So that made me wanted to blend in and wanted to, be a part of it. So that is like sort of one baggage that I carried through elementary school. And coming to Canada, since I don't speak English and I'm an international student, and one thing that really I wouldn't say hurt me, but struck me is that people also look at you differently. That people say that you're fob, you're not from here, and that you don't speak English. So I do want to break that barrier somehow, and I think that was additional baggage that I carried. This being not belong really made me feel that I'm maybe less than other people, right? So, I'm not sure if you listened to Chamath's interview that, he talked with Lex Friedman. He really went really in depth on where his ambition coming from, and most of it is just that he grew up in a very poor family, and he never had enough. And one story that really struck me is that, in I think in middle school, his teacher brought the group to DQ to give them an ice cream. And that was like his 13 years old. And that was the first time that Chamath ever had an ice cream from DQ. So he was so surprised that, the teacher was like a godlike figure that can give them a ice cream. And I wouldn't say I went through that, but I did feel that, in some way I was less than others. So I always had this baggage that I want to just be everyone else. I want to create something and do something that's different. I think that's one aspect, and second aspect is I think I really appreciate where my parents are giving me education. So they sent me out for me to enjoy a better education, and of course they spend a lot of money to send me out, and I think early on they gave me a great education on not everything come for free, right? So they let me realize that these educations are not for free; they need to pay for it, and I am grateful for it. So I always wanted to give back in some way. So to make sure that what I done here is worthwhile for their investments in education. And what they wanted me to do is to go to big corporate, right? Because my parents are entrepreneurs. So I did went to corporate in my early university years. I did went to accounting. I did went to Big Four. So that was my report card for them. So I was able to make sure that they understand that their son have the capability to get into larger companies. So that was my report card from my parents. But going into accounting isn't really what I wanted. That is sort of just a report card from my parents. What I wanted is really to do something that can make a difference, right? Um, and the third way third point that I really why I became so ambitious or have this baggage that I carry is because I feel like my story is a bit different from all the Silicon Valley immigrants kids. I'm not really an immigrant, and immigrants are usually typically labeled as, they work five jobs when they're kids. Their parents have to do a restaurant, and they barely struggle to be alive. My story is the exact opposite. I think I have huge privilege from my parents because, they're entrepreneurs, they're pretty well off. So I was able to have everything that I wanted, and then I was able to see real time. A lot of my friends who also international student have the same thing, and they sort of uh, take it for granted. And looking from the other side, people who look at international student, they automatically label that as the privileged kids who use their money from their parents but not work hard. And I actually really hated that. I was like, that's not good that you give this label, and I don't want to be labeled like that. I wanted to earn it for myself. I wanted to disassociate me with my backgrounds because nobody chose their background, and really wanted to prove to others or to myself that I'm able to make it on my own. So with all these factors, I think it really gave me a huge ambition to do something, to start something, and I think I realized early on that the only way that you can make a difference is to start a business or investing because I don't have money, I can't invest. So, the only way is to start a business. And the origin story of Summer, I think looking back, it was the wrong way to start, to be very honest. Um, like I reflected, I think there's two ways that you can start something. One is ambition. If you are really ambitious, you want to do something different, or you want to make a lot of money, you can start. Or you start with curiosity. You're very curious about one thing. You're very fixated on a problem. You would really want to solve the problem. That's why you started. So I sort of started with my ambition point. So I met my co-founder Mohammed, who I really, hang along really well during an internship. And I see that, there's a lot of potential between us and there's a lot of synergy that there's possibility we could be a co-founder. So during the summertime, I asked him, do you want to do something together? He's like, hell yeah. So during that summertime, we just brainstormed what are some good business ideas that people actually need right now. And the common background that we had is that we both lived in the residence, and both of us didn't have a car. It's very difficult for us to find grocery. And at that time, Instacart wasn't that popular, so we thought there's no one that's doing grocery delivery, especially for resident students. And we saw that grocery delivery is actually not that hard to start. We could just do the delivery ourselves. So I was like, okay, why don't we just start with doing grocery delivery? So that's how it started. It's like, for me, it's finding co-founder, brainstorm a problem, realize that there might be a problem, and we find what is the easiest way to start and the fastest way to get started, which is grocery delivery. And that's how we started.
This is so awesome, man. Like, I think the context that you laid out really makes everything together. And I wanted to like Touch upon like when you said you started summer, you met your co-founder Mohammed from an internship, and you were actually delivering groceries yourself at the very beginning stages of the company. I wanted to talk about like let's say 1, 2, 3 months in, you were doing this, seeing a little bit of traction, and you actually made a video about summer and you applying to an accelerator. Can you tell me more about like what happened behind the scene?
You mean the application video?
Yep.
Okay. Is it YC that you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So YC's been a struggle. So I think we applied 3 times. Uh, is it 3 times? Yeah. The first time we didn't even get considered at all. I think, also I just want to be, a bit more helpful for the audience. I think we had really the wrong mentality to start. Um, we're not really obsessed with the problem. We're not saying that we want to change the grocery delivery field. We're just so passionate about it. It's not true. What we wanted to do is just make something really big and, make something that is huge that can fulfill our ego, to be very honest. And I think one of the most important thing that we thought at the time is getting funding and or getting into a high signal accelerator. Um, so getting into YC has become very um, central to us because YC it's really the ultimate network for early stage startups and getting in it's like a stamp of approval. Like I said, I can give myself approval that I'm not just less than other people. I'm actually the same as everyone. So getting into YC or getting funding has become the focus, which if you're doing startup right now, this is absolutely another thing that you should focus on. You should definitely focus on the problem and be curious about it and care less about getting into accelerator or getting funding because that is just something that help you to do your business better, to solve the problem better, but rather than something that you should focus on. But reflecting back, we took the wrong approach. So we were really, really eager to get into YC. And the first time I think we made a video, um, we weren't that confident. We were very early. We have not much customer. We just started it. And it makes sense that the YC rejected us. But I think the second time that we made a video is like almost a year or 2 years in. And at that time, we did had quite a bit of traction, and then we did extensive study about how people make a great YC video, and we watched some of the top trending video on YouTube. And what we realized is that it's really not what what you're building or your idea that matters. It's really about the team and the synergy between you and the co-founder. And one detail that we noticed from the top trending video is that the two founder was smiling the whole time, and they were like communicating without any plan, without any script, and they're like at the end, I think the painting on the wall accidentally dropped or something, so there's some novel factor, and then
Love that.
we actually try to I wouldn't say we try to mimic it, but we were like, okay, let's just go in with no plan. Let's have a few points. First, tell them who we are, our background. Second, tell them our traction. Third, tell them what we're building, and that's it. That should be enough. And we know all of that for sure on our deep down. So we actually tape, I don't know, like 10, 10 different times, and then we picked one that seems the most natural, the most synergetic, and at the end there's also a little twist, which I think he spilled the water or something. So so we really loved the video, and then we posted it, and we actually got selected to be interviewed. Um, and we put so much energy into the application and the video. I was like, holy shit, fucking finally we got an interview. And what kid you now, we spent the whole week preparing for the interview. We wrote out all the possible questions that they could ask. 60 questions. We just spoke to three other YC founders and asked them what did they ask in the YC interview. And to be to be clear, the YC interview is only 10 minutes. It's only 10 minutes, so they can
Yep.
only ask you at most three questions. But we prepared so much. Because I think at that point YC was our hope because we're so close. I think I think the statistic is that maybe 5% of the people get into the interview, but people who got into interview, maybe half of them get in. So yeah, our chances of getting in is very, very high. So I was like, shit, we gotta nail this. Um, and then in the day of interview, we fucked up. We fucked up real bad. We prepped 60 questions, but we didn't prep our numbers. That's the most ridiculous thing. Um, and I think I need to blame that on my accounting degree, like, because in accounting, um, so in our business very specifically, there's a difference between gross merchandise value and revenue. Because gross merchandise revenue also include the money that we pay our merchant, which is the grocery store, and the real revenue that we keep is the net revenue margin, which is the difference that we charge on top. But in accounting, revenue is the whole thing. There's no concept of GMV. So I was taught revenue is the whole thing. And when they asked net revenue, I was like, what is net revenue? It's like, and we struggled to answer that for like 3, 4 minutes. So I was like, fuck, we're definitely fucked up because, if we can't even answer the simple number question, how are they gonna select this? So, anyways, we fucked up. So the reflection is, don't spend a week prepping for your YC interview. Just be your authentic self. But do spend a week prepping for your number. Right? Number is one of the most important thing. And it turns out, I think our video got quite viral. I think maybe 14,000 or 20,000 people looked at it. And then, and we wrote that we got into the interview, and a lot of if you see the comment, there's a lot of haters. It's like, these companies definitely not gonna work out. They're doing some bullshit, which turned out they're true. It didn't work out at the end, but I think it's a good video. If you have time, maybe just look at it and see how we get started. And even met a friend. I even met a friend in Collision. He's like, "Oh, aren't you the one that's doing the YC video?" I was like, "What the fuck?" You watch but yeah, that's pretty funny.
That's awesome. This is a perfect segue. I was gonna talk about collision, because like I want to talk about like towards the end, um, of the startup. You're also about to graduate. You went in collision. You met your friend Ryan, CEO of Captain.ai. That's summer at collision. So for context, like collision, it's like the national tech conference in Canada that was hosted every summer. And and through your interaction with Ryan, at Collision, you actually were able to land a job at Captain.ai after you graduate. So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about like how did you two meet, and like how were the interactions? How did that lead to like where you landed now at Captain.ai?
Yeah, thanks. I know you listened to my first podcast. That's why you know the story. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so I think that was in mid 2022. So me and Mohammed, we decided to shut down summer. I think during May of 2022. It was just, we tried a lot of stuff. We realized that, 15-minute grocery delivery, this space is not really valid. It's really a space that's created by the flooded money from VC. And even though 15-minute grocery delivery is nice, but it's not a necessity. And it's a business model that's not sustainable. Like you just burn money at the end of the day. There's no way that you can make money back. So as soon as we realized that, and we even tried a lot of different other things. We tried like one of the problems that we saw was people who live in residence share their grocery cart. We're thinking if we can create a product to split your grocery cart and everyone can order live, but none of those work out, and we're faced with the challenge of graduation, and everything just get more real. We need to support ourselves. I can't rely on my parents anymore. I gotta find a place. So things just get real. And then my my mindset at the time is that I think I got, really a little cocky because I feel like, after I did my startup, I'm capable. There's nothing I can't do. So I thought, I'll just let fate decide what's next for me. I didn't have a plan. I have zero plan. I'm applying to no jobs. And there was a few theories that I think what I really wanted to do at the time is to get into an early stage startup that actually work and that actually I have conviction behind. The reason is I really want to see how they build their product, how they talk to the customers, how they fundraise, and how does the company with a product that have potential product market fit operate. So I think Collision was a perfect chance because that was in June, so right after we shut down summer, and I was like, okay, I have an opportunity that I can expose myself to as many startup as possible. Maybe I can land a job, but that was sort of the goal, but that wasn't. I didn't really expect anything to come out of it, but it turns out, it did. So the story is pretty funny. I did go around and talk to millions of people, but I don't remember any of them. Right? It's like speaking to a random guy in a party. It's very hard to remember. And Ryan actually messaged me. So that was the interesting part. So in Collision, there's an app where you can message other people. And in the app, I still wrote myself as the founder of Summer because I don't know what else to put. And then I wrote 15-minute grocery delivery. And Ryan at the time, just a little bit background. He's doing Captain. Captain is a B2B SaaS software that can help internal delivery fleet to manage their delivery. So one of the use cases for 15-minute grocery delivery is that because we have a lot of our in-house delivery drivers, so it's our own driver, and sometime when order comes in, we need to tell them where to go. And a lot of the time is very on demand because we're 15 minutes. So what happened is if you have one driver and 10 orders, how do you really optimize it? Where do you tell the driver to go? And it's actually a perfect use case for Ryan's software, which they use for restaurants, right? So what they do is they partner with Pizza Pizza, and Pizza Pizza have a lot of their own driver. So what they do is that they give the driver the driver app, and they give the manager a dispatch app so that they can really track where the driver is going and give recommendations on the best route. So anyways, and Ryan saw that I'm doing 15-minute grocery delivery. He wanted me to be his customer. He wanted to sell his product to me. And he's like, Frank, let's meet. And then we met. And then I told him, yo, I'm not doing it anymore. It's like, what the fuck? Um, and then he asked me, what are you doing right now? I was like, nothing. Uh, and he asked me, oh, do you have some experience fundraising? And I was like, well, yeah. During summer, I did talk to around like 30, 40 investors. I did made a lot of pitch. And I was like, would you love to join me? I'm fundraising right now. Maybe you can help. I was like, what the? We just met. We just met for the first time. And I was like, sure, but I'd love to know more. And then at that time, it's actually Captain was part of Techstars. So he brought me to the Techstar demo day and actually had a chance to watch Ryan pitch Captain. And I was able to get a deeper understanding about his product. And I gained a lot of conviction because I realized this is one of the problems that we had in summer, which is having a really great dispatch app for our drivers and let the driver to use it. So we actually have the app, but it's a lot shittier than what they built.
Mm.
And I realized the need for a lot of the restaurants because if you don't realize it's actually 15% of the restaurants are also having their own driver. So I quickly gained a lot of conviction about what they're building. I believed what they're building is right, and they definitely could reach product market fit. And there's also validations from Techstars, and they have around 500K of ARR at the time. So it's like, okay, I think this is the right company for me to join, and I can probably learn a lot. And I have believed in this product, and I know that if the team work hard, they can really bring the product to something big. Um, so we had a dinner and discussing. He told me about a lot about his story. Maybe just a little bit. The first business that he got was Pizza Pizza, and he got it because he met the person on the airplane. And during that time, Captain was almost running out of business. He's been doing it for 3, 4 years, almost running out of hope. But he met I think the topic is it executive of Pizza on an airplane, and it turned afterwards they closed the deal and they built the product based on Pizza's need. Yeah, but he convinced me with the story and everything. So I decided to join, and turns out to be a good decision.
That's awesome. Like it's all it's always like Steve Jobs mentions, like dots always connect. Like when you look backwards, like from the get go when you were like doing summer, like you never knew like that would have landed where you at today, right? Because but coincidentally, like if you look backwards, it's like it was like a similar space. You had this, you experienced the same kind of problems. The experience that you have with fundraising were also very transferable to where you're working now at Captain. So it's like that's super great.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about Ideas Can't Wait. So Ideas Can't Wait is a podcast that you started also at the end of 2022 when you graduated, and you decided to really hone into interviews with young founders, like specifically founders who are in their 20s. And yeah, like can you tell me a little bit more about like how did you decide, or why did you want to do this podcast?
Yeah, so I always say there's anything, if you ask a person why do you do certain thing, there's always two sides. One is internal side, one is external. So internally, intrinsically, I feel like I've never done anything that's, really content creating or telling others about my story or other story. And I always thought that is challenging and it's hard because it really requires you to be yourself and to be vulnerable and to expose the full person to the public. And I was scared of that. So I was like, shit, if I'm really scared of it, that means I need to do it. So I have this very destructive person. But anyways, like I think I really wanted to, to try something like that, especially after summer. I've nothing to do. It's like, okay, this is a huge challenge. I really dread doing it. I remember the first interview that I did, I just find the most comfortable person, which is my co-founder. I just went and then I just recorded with my iPhone. I was like, fuck. And on the way, I was so nervous. It was like, shit, what should I say? Um, and then I have to prepare myself. I had a beer on a random street. So I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. So I went to my co-founder. I think intrinsically, I just want to stay out of my comfort zone. I want to do something that I've never done before and to really conquer my fear. So I think that's the biggest driving force for me to get started. And second thing is that I think in the beginning journey of my startup, I started to listen to a lot of podcasts. And one transformational podcast for me was All In Podcast. I was able to listen to the four friends who was very accomplished entrepreneurs discuss civilly on the different topics and express different opinions, and at the end come out still as friend. And that has changed a lot of the way that I think and how I approach the world. So podcast has been transformational for me. So I always thought, podcast is a great way to express my thought and to learn from others. So podcast is the right media for me, in my opinion. And thirdly, I think I want to learn from other people who has crazy experiences that I can learn from. And I think I thought that might be valuable. It turned out to be the most valuable thing because normally you wouldn't be able to have a one-to-one conversation go into so deep for 1 hour or more and asking uncomfortable questions in a normal setting. You just never get that. But in podcasts, you can. You can ask whatever the fuck question you want to ask and they'll answer it, right? So I find that very beautiful. And then, so basically learning from others. So this is 3 points of my internal thing. But externally, why I want to do the podcast or having the vision is first of all, as a young founder myself, I realized that, there wasn't much exposure for me when I was doing my startup, and doing marketing has always been hard. So first of all, I want to help others to get more exposure. And I always feel like entrepreneurs are the one that have the most different thought. because they have an opinion about one thing, that they discover the problem, they want to solve it. That's why they started the business. But that means in the beginning they have to have the opinion. They need to have a different think, right? So startup entrepreneurs are always the one that have the thought, but it's hard for them to say it or express it. So I want to create a platform for them to express their thought. That's second. And third, I feel like one of the things that I really want to advocate is for people to try entrepreneurship, especially when they're young, especially even in the universities, because I had a lot of the limiting beliefs. I thought that I wouldn't be able to do it. I would fail, but I think hearing about the story from other entrepreneurs can really inspire other people. Like, you hear about how they get started. It's not that complicated. It's very simple. It should give you the confidence to do what you want to do and pursue what you want. Right. I think the third is to, inspire other kids to, start more startup and actually just pursue what they wanted to pursue and be confident. Yeah, so that's the external part.
Love that, love that. Like if you want to make, okay, let's say if the ideas can wait podcast could show up on Google on the first page on the first column for certain keywords, what would you want the keywords to be like?
Um, well, I think startup founder for sure. Um, and some factor of young, because I think that really identified my audience and the people who I interview. So yeah, young startup founder, these keywords. Yeah.
Sounds good, sounds good. And like you mentioned earlier, you wanted to inspire and educate more young people about entrepreneurship and encourage you to start them. What does the vision of like ideas can wait? Do you want it to be, have you thought of expanding beyond podcasts? Do you want it to be like, yeah, is there like any directions or any like goals that you visualize to look like in the end?
Yeah, I think, one great example is that I think at the same time I started Asocial, and before it was called A Style, and the main vision of A Style or Asocial is we want to unite the young founders. I think that's been a common theme, because um, uh, you see a lot of success story from the accomplished startup founder, but the one that's up and coming, the one that just started, the one that doesn't have much experience, or the one that's being ignored, and not being exposed as much. So I think at that time I did really want to garner this community, and let more young founders meet each other. I think that's super inspiring. Um, like, I think beyond the podcast, I went on to the physical space, and I started Asocial with Victor, and then started to getting involved, Arda, Michael, Oliver, and Sean, and then because all of us are young founders, and we feel like having this community was really valuable. We were friend first, all of us were friend, and because we were talking, we're communicating and sharing each other our progress in our startup. It really motivated all of us to keep going, and we feel like because of this energy that we had, we can create more of these for other people. Like, a startup journey is very lonely, right? Like, you're just on your own to solve your own problem. I don't. It's very difficult to find another person who's doing the same. If you did, they're your competitor. So, um, so really having these young founder networking community, it's really one of the big factors that keep you still going, because you realize you're not alone. Other people are eating shit just the same as you do, right? So I feel like I just want to create a space where people feel heard, people feel that they're not alone on their startup journey, and also encourage them to work harder. There might be people who's further along the journey, who's even younger than you. I hope that doesn't bring you too much pressure, but at the same time inspire you to to go for it. Yeah, so I think the idea is to create a community and let people feel heard. There's no like a goal that I want to achieve. Like I didn't want to say like 10,000, 20,000. I didn't have like a number or something, but I just want to make sure that, people are not alone, people feel heard, and we can create a community out of it.
That's awesome, man. Have um what was the most unexpected thing that came out of your podcast?
Yeah, I would say is how much I enjoy the conversation. Um, I think, you mentioned before how I started the podcast was so different until now that I interview people. Because th- like it's really up to me on how I should take the conversation, the question that I ask, and the follow-ups that I ask the guests. And then what I realized is I was able to go so deep in their stories, and they would tell the most vulnerable thing to me. I was like, "Holy shit!" That's fucking crazy. I was like, "What the fuck?" Everyone should hear about the story, and like even though I'm still very nervous every time I go into the interview, but after the interview I was always energetic. I was like, I'm so pumped. I gotta jump around. I was like, holy fuck, this story really inspired me. I didn't expect that. I thought, it will be just be a platform and get to know them well. And but but that effect really stunned on me. I was like, I think that in the most ideal world, I think the post production editing work, it's not the best. You need to do a lot of stuff, and it's very hard work. But if I were to do one thing, I'd love to do podcast every day. I love to interview people. I love to learn their stories, and it's a huge learning for me. And I think everyone have a story, and you just need to think about creative ways to help them to open up and to tell a story to the world, and everyone can be inspiring, especially in the founder field. So that has been something that really changed the way that I look at podcasts. Now, what I care about, really, all I care about is to make sure the conversation is awesome. That's
Hmm.
it. Like, everything else should be falling in place. But as long as I am enjoying the podcast, I am learning stuff from the question that I asked, then I'm confident that other people will enjoy it too, and it will be great content to put out. But initially, when I started, I didn't really have the thought. But after a few awesome conversations, I was like, holy shit, I need to dig deep in these conversations. And I think one of the things that I started doing more is I went pretty in depth in my research before I started the podcast. I look at everywhere what they did before, and I think about what are something that I am curious about, and just really centered around my curiosity. What am I curious about you that I want to learn more of? But yeah, like having that mindset change and really hear the story, and so vulnerable, so deep story about the founders. That's been really transformational for me.
I see, I see. Like to you mentioned earlier, like the only thing that you care about with podcasts is making the conversation great. And part of doing that is like making sure people open up, and ways of doing that is like doing a lot of research and really let center the conversation around your curiosity. So my question to you is like, what do you think makes a conversation great?
I think you forgot that you're there. Like, and there's, if you're in a great conversation that because you will not think about doing anything else, but rather than being in there. And as a person who's listening, you should not be thinking about what's to ask next, but just to be submerged into what the other person is saying. And if you realize that you're at that state, that means you're fully present. The reason why that you're fully present is because the what the other person's saying is so interesting to you that you mind just can't do anything else. I think this is the symptom of a great conversation. Not a symptom, but like how a great conversation is. But I think there's also a way that you can create a great conversation. I think I listened to Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss really is really a master. He did like hundreds of podcasts, and one of the thing that he said was, there's a few tricks. So in the beginning, you really want the podcast to be engaged, the guest to be engaged. So you really got to ask questions that hook them and let them forget about the pressure potential pressure they're expecting. So what you did before was great, asking me about marathon. That's like a question that's outside of the interview, but I think having a great hook will really ease people's pressure. And second, when you want to ask tough questions, a question that requires the other to be vulnerable and open up. I think one of the good ways is that I can open up first. So if I'm asking you about your family and like a thing about your family, I can tell, oh, this is my family, right? So that help the guest to ease up a little bit and be more vulnerable. And thirdly is to have certain topics you want to know, but don't strictly follow the questions, right? Just answer or ask question based on whatever they ask. And when there is like a period to the conversation, then start a new question. So these are all the way that you can make a conversation great.
How do you go about inviting who to be on the pod?
Yeah, so yeah, like I think there's a few things, right? Like um if you really want to make the podcast awesome, in my opinion, like it is it's it's great that you can reach a lot of people because that will make the guest's time worthwhile so much more. Like if you tell the guest there's only 30 people listening and you tell the guest there's a million people listening, of course they will want to get on your million people podcast. So but to reach scale, there's also certain requirements. I think podcast is really, really tough game. I think it's a bit different from YouTube. The top 1% of podcasters take 99% of the listening. That is the truth. And two, like, doesn't matter how great your conversation is, doesn't matter how amazing your conversation is, you gotta let people to click it first. And what are the factors to let people click? First, the person that you're interviewing is very famous, right? And second, you're discussing about a very controversial topic. And third, you got to create those TikTok clips so that people can see a glimpse of what you guys are talking about, and then find the long form content. And these are hard things to do. These have nothing to do with asking good questions and having great conversations. Well, there could be some correlations, but this is really outside of having great content. It's a bit different from YouTube, I guess, because people can just have a preview or just click on it and watch for a bit. In podcasts, you really have to be committed or really want to listen to that to click it. People are very rarely browsing through podcasts and chose on one that they never heard before. It's either through recommendation or something that they saw, right? So in terms of discoverability part, it's a bit hard. Yeah, sorry, what's your question again? Can you repeat?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I was asking like how do you decide like which guest to bring on?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So I think discoverability is hard. So in the early time, I did really want to bring on a lot of famous people, which I do not know. So I did a lot of outreach. But when I realized that podcast is actually a tough commitment, because it really requires you to first of all know what the podcast is about, and the second, to commit a lot of time, and third, be very vulnerable on the podcast. And do you trust the guest to make your video public? So that requires, like, I wouldn't say huge, but a certain amount of trust towards the podcast. And if your podcast is not getting a lot of views, it really gives them very little reason to get on it. So I did try. I don't think I tried extensively, but yeah, I think in the future I'll probably try again, but maybe more relevant. But what I came to realization now is that there's so many great founders around me that I want to interview. And these are the people that I met for a brief moment that really impressed me during our conversation and that I want to know more of. So these are the person that I'm deciding to interview right now at the moment, because I feel like those are the people that's less known, like around the space, but they have a lot of story to offer. They have very interesting mind, and if I provide them with a platform, if people see really what their thinking is, it would be really helpful for me and also for the audience, right? So right now, there's just people around me. and who I think have very interesting thought that I'm curious about, right? It's all about me. Like if I'm curious about the person, you're on. If I'm not, I'm sorry. That's it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, okay, okay. Like, what is pop munchies?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so that's one of the things um, that I decided to do to break my limiting belief. So one of the uh, limiting belief that I had is that I can't code or coding is not my strong suit. Because I think it's weird. Like since I was in high school, I always stayed away from coding because um, I was trying to blend in. I was trying so hard to not be a nerd. I was afraid to be a nerd. That's very funny, right? And being coding, that sort of automatically associate yourself with the nerd. So I try to stay away from it, which now I think back is such a stupid thought. Like it's so stupid I can't even describe it. But anyways, so I was always, very far away from coding. But as soon as I get into startup, I realized, holy shit, coding is probably the only only hard skill that you require a long time to master and focus that I didn't get a chance to learn. I think marketing you can learn, sales you can learn, design you can probably learn, but coding you need a long time to learn it, right? So, and even in my first startup in summer, I think one of like the hardest problem to solve is how to make a software like a mobile app or a website that really works and that made it really well. And I struggled on that. I didn't have the power to do it, so I hired other people to help me, which is not the most optimal if you're early stage. And I even have a few friends help me build it, but the goal alignment wasn't there. They want to use the project to show other employers that they have built a project, but rather than really build a project with me together. So I had like I would say, the software part is one that I really struggled in summer. So after a while, I realized, I have some time in my hand. I really wanted to learn coding. I said I want to learn coding for the longest time. And when ChatGPT came out, I was like, holy shit, I don't need to go to school. I can just study at home. I can just ask questions about coding. So I set myself a challenge. So there's a program called BuildSpace, which I decided to join. It's a 6 weeks program where you can build anything that you want. Um, so I was like, okay, I'll just use this as an excuse for me to learn how to code. And at the end of it, I want to, code a project. And 6 weeks is quite crazy. So I decided to start, and the perfect topic that I explored was podcast because I was doing my podcast, and one of the things that I thought could make the discoverability a bit easier is to make a summary of each podcast. For example, like one of the podcasts that I saw with Lex Friedman and Balaji is 8 hours long. Who the hell is gonna sit there to listen to 8 hours that are fucking conversation? I was like, I wish there's someone that summarizes it for me I can listen to or just read upon. So I decided to make that. And it turns out during the 6 week, I leveraged ChatGPT so much. All I did is stay on ChatGPT. I asked him a question about, how can I get started building this project? What are the components that's needed? What are the language that I needed? And then I asked him, okay, if I want to summarize this podcast, what tools do I need? Or what function do I need? And can you help me to do that? So all the way, I actually only spent like 2 weeks building the project, and I got it done. And the rest of the 4 week is just debugging and creating the front end. That was the funny part. But I think through that process, I reached my goal, which is really, break my self-limiting belief that I couldn't code. And I feel like, I can code. And if I'm working with a developer, he can't just brush me off because I know what they're doing. I know their stuff. I can read the code now, even though I still can't write proficiently, but I definitely can leverage AI to build my own project. Maybe longer than the 10x developers, but I would consider myself I'm a sufficient junior developer intern. So I was really proud of that. I was really able to learn how to code in just a short period of time. And I think this is a skill that I want to keep building because you realize coding is really a superpower. you can really use leverage coding to build something that never existed before to turn into something that's usable, a real product. And I find tremendous amount of joy when I was coding too, because at the most fundamental level is problem solving. You have an idea, you want to accomplish it. So how do you accomplish it? You break it down. You break down the big problem into smaller 10 problems. And after you break down the 10 problem, you disseminate it further. Like, how do I write this function? You got to learn this library. You got to learn this syntax to write this function. So it's all about problem solving. And after you solve the smaller step, you come to the picture, you realize, holy shit, I came so far and I built this product. It feels amazing. It just feels so great. I think, it's, I don't know how to describe it, but the moment when ChatGPT helped me to roll Pop Munchie, I was the happiest man in the world. But yeah, like the reason why I didn't continue is that I didn't feel convicted. The assumption is correct. I did a fair bit of custom interview and also show a few of the podcasters. I feel like a podcast summary, this thing, I'm not sure if people want to listen to it. And I don't feel too convicted about the problem. So I think it's completely fine. And I think even Paul Graham said it. If you haven't really find a problem that you really feel convicted to, you should just keep building projects. If you feel the project is fun, don't think too much. Get started. And after you realize maybe this is not the thing to do, you don't have to do it again. It's just a process for me to learn. And I think I reached my goal. Yeah.
That's amazing. This is so amazing. And at the end of the project, for Plum Munchies, you are actually invited to go on a stage with Sean Perry, a serial entrepreneur. Do like a little roast session. How was that experience? How was the conversation?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy actually. Yeah, I remember I took like in BuildSpace there was like a weekly session where they invited some famous entrepreneurs on the stage to give us feedback, and that session was to roast your ideas. And there's like a 4,000 people in the Discord, and Farza, which is the founder of BuildSpace, asked, can someone, raise your hand and let Sean Puri roast your idea, and I raised my hand. I didn't expect that I can get picked from the 4,000 people, but I did. And then I showed him my idea, and then I actually forgot what he gave comments because I was so excited. I just tell him my thoughts. But afterwards, what I did is that I immediately used my software to create a summary of Sean Puri's My First Million podcast, and created a page, give him the summary of the podcast and sent it to him. Well, he didn't reply to me, but I feel like, that was a very great experience because, I wouldn't say he's my idol, but he is a famous person in the podcast space as well as the startup entrepreneur space. So I feel like there's a lot of common ground and I really resonate with what he's doing. But yeah, it's just great that I can show him what I'm building and, maybe he think it's somewhat useful, but yeah, but it's just a cool experience. Sorry, you muted.
Oopsie. Yeah, I think that's amazing, man. Like, I feel like there's like a constant theme where you just like really put yourself out there in the discomfort, whether it's like marathon, whether it's like doing startups from an accounting background, whether if it's learning how to code. That's like super amazing, man.
Thank
I like to close the podcast off with a challenge. Like, I like to ask our guests to give to our audience who's turning in right now, like a little actionable challenge that they can do. Is there anything top of mind?
you. I'm pretty sure that you have a dream or a thing that you always wanted to do, but for some reason, there's always this self-limiting belief. You thought you didn't have enough time. You thought you just not good enough to do it. You thought, people have judgments towards what you're doing. I think, through what I talked about with my story, I have that too. With the podcast, I was afraid that other people would judge me. With the coding, I thought I was, not smart enough to code. And with starting my startup, I thought, nobody would use it. But I think these are the self-limiting belief that we created for ourselves. But what I find out at the end, after I did all of those things, it is actually not as hard as you think. And it turns out not too many people care, you know, and and this is the whole reason why I did idea can't wait as well, is because I want to show you it's actually not that complicated or difficult to start something. Every entrepreneur, their starting story is very simple. It's just they have a problem, they want to solve it, and what is the first step, right? So I am very sure that you have something that you always wanted to try out. It's either writing a blog, having your own website, creating a podcast, doing a YouTube video, whatever that is. I'm sure that you have it, and for some reason you're putting it off. Just do it. You know, Nobody cares. Nobody give a shit what you do. Just put it out. It doesn't really matter. But it will be very meaningful to you because after you do it, you realize, okay, it's actually not that hard. It is you that put a self-limiting belief on yourself that stopped you from doing it. And after you did it, you realize, wow, the world is so big. There's a lot for me to do, and you feel great about yourself because you challenged it. Same as you waked up early, same as you went to gym in the morning. You feel good about yourself. So the one challenge that I would say is, you know, just get started doing something that you've been putting off. The for some reason that you're hesitant of doing, just do it. Nobody cares.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for coming, man. It's a pleasure to have you.
Likewise, man.